Yeah, we back. Now, today's video is going to be a follow-up video to one I dropped the other day entitled, White Man Says Mansa Musa Was a White Man. Now, in that video, I was reacting to a nonsensical video, a comedic video of a so-called YouTube historian, a YouTube pseudo-historian, trying to make the argument that the great Mansa Musa was actually a white man. He was not a black man. He was actually a white man. Now, today's video is going to be even crazier. So now we got another white man. I think he's a South African, a white South African. He's making the argument that the black South Africans aren't even indigenous to South Africa, right? Basically saying that there's no difference between the European settler and the black South African. He's saying that the black South Africans were migrants and the Europeans were settlers, right? So let's get into it, not wasting no time.
Black people are not the original inhabitants of South Africa, which, in fact, they're realizing that now. When they claimed that they owned all the land, the original inhabitants, of whom there are not many left, said, excuse me, we were the original inhabitants, you guys were migrants here as well, which they were. Okay, the original inhabitants of Southern Africa are called the Khoisan.
Now, first things first, before we get started, you got to understand the reason he's making this argument is not because he's actually trying to have a true conversation, a true discussion or debate in regards to history or anthropology or anything like that. The reason he's making this argument is to delegitimize any claims being made by black South Africans. So when black South Africans try to make calls saying they want the land back, he's basically saying that the land is not even yours. You are an immigrant. You're not even from here. You migrated from a different part of the continent. You're not even indigenous. So that's why he said, oh, when they claim that they own all the land, right? He's basically telling the black South Africans, yeah, I heard you talking about the land, but guess what? You're not even from here. You were an immigrant. That's what he's saying. That's the reason why he's making this argument. He's not operating in good faith, right? The only reason he's making this argument is to justify land theft. That's the only reason he's doing it. Basically saying that we as the European settlers have just as much of a right to the land as you do because you're a migrant and I'm a settler, right? So that's the only reason they're rewriting history is to justify the theft of land. That's it and that's all. Now let's continue.
When they claimed that they owned all the land, the original inhabitants, of whom there are not many left, said, excuse me, we were the original inhabitants, you guys were migrants here as well, which they were. Okay, the original inhabitants of Southern Africa are called the Khoisan. All right, now, and they were the inhabitants of the whole of Southern Africa. So the whole of South Africa, at one stage, were Khoisan. The black people originated in what is now Cameroon. That's where they...
Hold on, Khoisan aren't black?
No.
Now, in this part of the video, he even goes even further by saying that the Khoisan are the original inhabitants of the land, but the Khoisan are not black, therefore saying that black South Africans, you have no claim to the land. Only the Khoisan do, but they're not black, according to this guy right here. You see, they just be mixing and mashing the history, rewriting the history, remixing the history, microwaving history. I don't know what they be doing with the history, bro. Let's continue.
When the white guys arrive in Cape Town, so 1652 is when Dutch guys arrived there. At that stage, you could have divided South Africa almost exactly 50-50, what's now South Africa. The western half of the country was entirely Khoisan. There were no black people there. None at all. Only Khoisan. So we're Cape Towners, all that area, Khoisan people. The northern part of the country did have black people. They'd started arriving, and they were still migrating.
How long had they been there in the northern?
Well, it's a moot point, and people have debated it. It would seem that black people had probably started arriving in the northern parts of South Africa maybe 1,000 years, something like that, about 1,000 years before whites got there, right up in the north, okay? And they've been slowly moving south because it's an empty space. I mean, one of the things about Africa is it's very empty. Up until the 1950s, Africa was very empty. It's the population exploded because white colonists, the naughty white colonists, put hospitals there, and there's been this huge population explosion since the 1950s. But Africa was really very empty up until then. And so tribes moved around and just occupied new empty territory. So the guys coming down from the north, who called the Bantus, it's called the Bantu expansions when black people came out of the Cameroons, they'd been occupying South Africa and moving systematically south, down the east coast of South Africa.
They were pastoralists, am I right?
Yeah, they were pastoralists, yeah. Whereas the Khoisan were hunter-gatherers. They were like aboriginals. Okay, so they hadn't become pastoralists yet. The black guys are migrating down from the north and settling, doing exactly what white guys are doing. So white guys, the Dutch guys from Cape Town, were settling by moving westwards, eastwards. So the white guys are moving from Cape Town eastwards, and the black guys are moving down from the north. And they met at a place called the Fish River, which is now in the middle of South Africa, at a place called, it's still called Border. Everybody in South Africa calls that part of the country the border, even though there's no border there at all anymore. But there was a river called the Fish River, which is where blacks and whites first encountered each other. And then it started 100 years of warfare between whites and the Xhosa, who were the tribe that they met there. So, okay, so at that point, that would have been in about 1700. So whites and blacks first encountered each other in 1700. Okay? So whites had already been there for 100 years at that point.
And now, to protect themselves from any land reclamations in the future, in case, you want to come back and take the land back in like 100 years, they're proactively trying to protect themselves by remixing the history and saying that we've been here, before the blacks came. We've been here before the blacks. Now, he says that the black South Africans have arrived in the region about 1,000 years ago, right? Now, then he goes on to say that the continent was empty, right? Up until the 1950s, the continent was empty. Wasn't nothing going on in the continent until the white man came. I mean, man, listen, he's taking a history. He just having fun with the history at this point. Then he goes on to say that the white man established all these hospitals, and that's the reason why the black population has exploded. Now, keep in mind, the apartheid government only created the infrastructure for themselves and their families. They didn't even create it for the blacks. You got to keep that in mind. But like I said, he's just having fun with the history at this point. He's just freestyling. This is freestyle history. This is not real. This is freestyle history. When you get in the studio, you just start freestyling. That's what he's doing here. He just having fun. He in the studio freestyling off the top of the dome. Then he goes on to say that the black South Africans, they came out the Cameroons, right? They came out the Cameroons and started invading from the north, right? Now, keep in mind, he's talking about indigenous Africans. He's talking about men and women who are native to the continent, right? They're adapted to the climate. Their heritage is rooted in the continent. They're not foreigners like this guy who came from the Netherlands, that came from, Scotland or wherever the hell he came from. But he's trying to draw a direct comparison between native Africans who are indigenous to the continent and foreigners who hopped on a boat and arrived on the shores. So, like I said, the only reason he's doing this, he's not operating in good faith. He's simply trying to justify the theft of land. That's all he's doing. He's trying to protect himself from getting his land taken back from the rightful owners. And the rightful owners are the black man and the black woman. It don't matter where they came from, even if this theory is true, which is not. But it doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, you cannot compare an individual who is native to the continent and a foreigner who had to hop on a boat and traverse the oceans to arrive on the continent very recently. Right? You're talking about somebody who's been on the continent for thousands of years and somebody who arrived in recent times. Similar to the argument that a lot of right-wing conservatives make, especially in Europe, right? Obviously, they don't look at a native European who's been in Europe for thousands of years, whose lineage has been rooted in Europe for thousands of years. They don't see themselves equivalent to a recent migrant who's only been here for, a few generations or, in recent history, right? Obviously, there's a difference, right? It doesn't matter if they moved from Ireland to Scotland or from France to Germany. At the end of the day, they're native Europeans, and you are an outsider who just recently arrived. So that's my logic. That's how I look at it in the same instance as well. It's not the same. We're not the same. But in the video, he tries to make the comparison, and he literally says the black guys came and did what the same thing the white guys did. No, we did not. No, we did not. Now, he's throwing a whole bunch of different arguments at the wall, right? First, he's saying that the blacks are migrants to the area just like we are, right? We're both migrants. We're both settlers. And then he tries to say that you did the same exact thing we did, right? You're an invader like I am, right? God damn. Now, we got to be honest. I got to be honest here. This is a result of that Rainbow Nation propaganda, right? Telling the European settlers they have an equal stake in the land as the native inhabitants do, right? Because like I said, when the European settlers first came to the country, it was only up until recent history that they've tried to embrace this so-called African identity. But before that, up until recent history, they've been proudly proclaiming that they are Europeans. They are European descendants, right? They would have facilities labeled, Europeans only, right? But now in recent history, after the 90s, now they want to claim that we are indigenous Africans just like you. They just be freestyling. They just, like I said, they just be freestyling, man. Now, the one thing he was honest about was the 100 years of warfare between the black South Africans and the European settlers, right? Now, the reason for that 100 years of warfare was because the black South Africans deemed that the Europeans were encroaching on their territory. Now, if the black South Africans were migrants or invaders, like he claimed, then why did they view you as invaders, right? When you said, oh, we met around the same time, right? We arrived, recently. It's no difference between the two groups, right? So why did they view you as an outsider and an invader and wage a war for damn near a century against you to drive you back into the ocean if you claim that they are migrants who recently arrived to the area? Take a look up on the screen. The Xhosa Wars were a series of wars between the Xhosa and the British Empire, as well as the Trek Boers and what is now the Eastern Cape of South Africa. These events were the longest running military resistance against European colonialism in all of Africa, right? So the black South African man who you claim is a migrant to the area, right? He fought against you for a century because he viewed you as an outsider. And now you have remixed the history, and now you have said that it's actually the black South African man that is the foreigner. Now, isn't that so funny, right? The black South Africans saying that everybody, oh, you a foreigner, you a foreigner. Meanwhile, the white South African had turned around and said, actually, the black South Africans are the foreigners. This is insane. This is amazing. But unfortunately, this is what happens when a man gets drunk off that Rainbow Nation propaganda. This is what happens when a man is emboldened. And the reason they are emboldened is because there are a lot of black South Africans that will also run defense for the white South Africans, right? When I make videos and I be talking about the white South Africans, you definitely gonna find, a black South African or a colored South African or a mixed race South African come into the comment section and try to defend the white South African. So obviously they're now emboldened to where they feel confident enough to rewrite the history and claim that they're indigenous to South Africa, right? We are native South Africans. Keep in mind, they were calling themselves Europeans for decades and for centuries, right? Only recently have they adopted the South African identity. But anyways, I'm gonna jump into some footage. I believe this is a South African girl talking about this video. So I'm gonna run the footage. I'll be right back.
This is my first time to hear something like this, that black people are not the original inhabitants of South Africa. This is my first time. I don't know about you. But this is what I have to say. We Africans need to rewrite our own history. We Africans need to start teaching our children our own history written by us. Some of us were taught African history written by our colonizers. It is thanks to the media that some of us are realizing the truth, which is totally different from what is written in all their history books that is being taught in some of our schools till today. If we don't rewrite our history, our children will grow up not knowing who they really are. They are now dragging our continent with us. This is how far they are ready to go. They have come up with so many different narratives, but this is the first time I'm getting to hear something like this. But if any of you have ever heard anything like this before, please, I would like to see it in the comment section. Thank you all for watching, and let me know what you think about this video.
All right, we back. Now, listen, I don't got an issue if the Europeans want to remix their own history and teach their own children some made up fairy tale version of history to make themselves feel better. That's fine. The problem only comes when you want to take that same remix fraudulent history and then teach the black child that history and indoctrinate the black child on that nonsense. That's when we have an issue, right? Once the black child has to ingest and digest that nonsensical version of history, that is when we have problems. Now, if you want to establish your own secluded enclave that, you got your own institutions, everything segregated, you're doing your own thing in your own corner of the country, and you want to teach your own students that nonsense, that's fine. But when you live in an integrated society, a melting pot society, you cannot be trying to pass off your bullshit history as the dominant narrative of history, right? And that's what we seem to encounter when you live in a society that is occupied by whites. They want to pass off their fictitious version of history as the dominant version of history, where they said until 1950 Africa was empty until the white man came, and the white man was in South Africa before the black man came, and Mansa Musa was a white man, and the ancient Egyptians were white men, and you know what I mean? It's like this nonsensical version of history that they try to pass off as the gospel. Like I said, if you want to teach your children that bullshit, be my guest. The issue only comes in when you try to impose that on a black child, right? And like the lady said, us as black folks, we have to teach our own history. We have to establish our own narrative to combat whatever nonsense they try to push on us. Because obviously these guys, like I said, they just be freestyling, right? They just be freestyling, going on the top of their head, right? Even in the goddamn interview, that guy was freestyling. He was like, westward, eastward. You just saying anything, bro. Just saying any goddamn thing. So, you can't take these guys' word as the gospel, man. Like I said, he was not operating in good faith. He was not operating as a true historian or anthropologist. The only reason why he made up that fake version of history is to justify the land theft, right? So in case a black South African wants to come around and say, you're a settler, you're an invader, you're a foreigner, they can come back with a fake history and say, actually, you're the settler, you're the invader, you're the foreigner. I'm indigenous, I'm native, right? You came from Cameroon, like whatever nonsense he said, right? So listen, man, we can't listen to these guys. These guys will lie about any goddamn thing. They'll say Mansa Musa was a white man. That's how shameless these guys are, man. Anyways, man, it's your boy Nebuchadnezzar, that's Salim, back at the Billy, yes indeed. Cash app in the description. Support the channel, man. Support the album. Peace. And also, my apologies in case the background is kind of noisy. I'm at a Christmas party right now, with the family. But even at the Christmas party with the family, I'm still over here giving y'all this content, man. Your boy don't stop, your boy don't sleep. It never stop, it never stop. Anyway, man, it's your boy Nebuchadnezzar, that's Celine. I'm gone. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife, yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city, they loving me. Standing alone, I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They trying to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I been gained weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drop a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife, yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Making the news. Making the news. Breaking the rules. Yeah. Know that we making the news.